Greetings and welcome back to the Headbangers Open Air Alt Live review. Today we're talking about the Friday's running order. So today we're going to start off with the opening band of the day called Surgical Strike, who played between 12 o'clock and finished at 12:40. Now the weather was great, so we had two perfect days. So Surgical Strike, a German band officially formed back in 1993. As a five-piece band, and it was in 1994 that the band would release their first demo, which was called Some Noise. With the success of the first demo, it wasn't long before the band would release their second demo, which was called Overruled. This was released in 1996. And a long time period, in 2016, the band released their first EP. This was called V11X111. And in 2020, the band would release their first album, which is called Part of the Sick World. Now, this was released on Metalville Records. It got some really good reviews and got well received in the press and the fans alike worldwide. In 2024, the band released their second album, which was called 24/7 Hate, also on Metalville Records. These albums both have fantastic artwork. As you'll see, if you've got the albums, you'll know what to expect. Would consist of members Marcello Vanquez, Rochet on guitars, would have Jens Albert on vocals, would have Florian, Cyback on bass, would have Mortis, Menke on drums, and also on guitars would have Frank Rank on guitars. So that would be the lineup. Now, listening to the band's first album, Part of This Sick World, which is a really, really good album, folks. Vocals very much come across between Exodus singer Steve Zetra, and I guess you could say a little bit of Bobby Blitz from Overkill. Musically, the music comes across between Overkill, Exodus, Testament. Although this band are very German, the music is very West Coast thrash metal. And as this band were the opening acts for the Friday, they were extremely heavy, extremely tight, powerful, and lots of energy. Not to mention brutal aggression thrash metal. Like Thursday's opening act, which was Strike Master, Surgical Strike, both bands are definitely were a wake-up call. They certainly woke the audience up and played a great set for 40 minutes. So I'm going to tell you now what the songs were that Surgical Strike played. So the band would open up with the song The Lesson, followed by Conspiracy, Alienated, Fearmonger, Dead Engine Gone, Confrontation, 24/7 Hate, Shithouse, and Propaganda. So that was the songs that the band played live. Great performance. Go and check out the band's two albums. Now, next up was a band that I grew up listening to in the 80s. And I was really looking forward to seeing them for the first time ever. German thrashers Assassin. Now, these guys did two amazing albums back in the 80s for Steamhammer Records. The band were formed back in 1985. And in the same year of 1985, the band would release their debut demo, which was called Holy Terror, followed by the Saga of Nemesis demo in 1986. A live recording demo was in 1987, and the band's debut album, The Upcoming Terror, released in 1987, which is a fantastic album, folks. If you've not heard it, got to check it out. This was followed by the band's second album, which is an absolute brilliant album as well. It was called Interstellar Experience, also released on Steamhammer back in 1988. Sadly, the band broke up and would come back in 2005 with the band's next album, which was called The Club, and the 6-year gap before the band would release their next album, which was called Breaking the Silence in 2011. 2016 would see the band's next release, which was called Combat Cathedral, followed by Best Eye Immundus, released in 2020. Now, this was released on Massacre Records. The thing with Assassin, they're a very, very heavy, brutal band from Germany, very much in the same vein as Creator for sheer speed and aggression. The band's debut album features some absolutely great songs, such as Bullets, Holy Terror, Assassin, Nemesis, and Speed of Light, which also is a great song. The band's second album was a little bit less aggressive. The band's second album was also yet another brutal album, which is some fantastic songs. We have Abstract War, which is a brilliant song. Another great song on the album was AGD. Now, if you've not heard the first two albums, you really need to check them out, folks. They're a fantastic band. They're very heavy, very brutal, very German thrash. Even the later albums are great, but the first two albums are cult classics, with the current lineup being Ingo, Bajan Sark on vocals, Bjorn Sonderman on drums, Occam Kramer on bass guitar. We'd have Jorgen Schultz Previous guitarist for the band was Frank Blackfire, as well known as with Sodom. He's also worked with Creator. With second guitarist Stefano Sumera. Like I said, I was very excited to watch this band live. I've never seen them before, and I wasn't disappointed. The band put on an absolutely amazing performance. Sheer power, aggression, and in-your-face thrash metal. From the opening song to the finishing song, every song was on top form. The crowd loved it. I loved it. Everybody just thought they were amazing. They were a fantastic band to watch live. So now I'm going to tell you what the songs were that Assassin played live. So the band would open up with the intro Chemitrails, followed by Forbidden Reality, Fight, Nemesis, Baka, The Last Man, Holy Terror, Abstract Wars, Assassin, and the last song would be called Bullets. So that was a set list for Assassin. Like I said, folks, if you've not heard Assassin before and you like brutal German thrash metal, this is a band to check out, especially the first two albums, Upcoming Terror and also Interstellar Experience. Next up was another great band that I've been wanting to see for some time since I've heard the music. This was the band called Wings of Steel. Now, these guys are amazing young musicians from America, and the singer's Swedish. The band were formed back in 2019 by guitarist Parker Halub, who's an amazing guitarist. He's a very talented young guitarist, along with drummer Damien Renaud, and the amazing singer from Sweden, like I said, a guy called Leo Unnemark, along with bassist Mathia Trobeck on bass guitar, along with second guitarist Stefan Berlet. Now, the band were formed in Los Angeles, California back in 2019, like I say, by guitarist Parker. The lineup would also consist of drummer Mike Mayhem. Having gone on social media and checked out the band on YouTube, I found that Wings of Steel were absolutely amazing. They take me back to the early 80s, mid-80s. Two bands in particular, Leatherwolf and also Fifth Angel. The band have only recorded one EP, one full album and one live album, and currently about to release their band's second album, which is coming out later this year. So the first EP that the band would release was back in 2022. This was called Wings of Steel, followed by the full-length album, Gates of Twilight. Both the album and EP are extremely recommended, folks. If you like the bands I've just mentioned, you're going to really like them. Other bands that spring to mind, listen to these guys, would be Riot, Iron Maiden, Queensryche, and they're certainly a force to be reckoned with. Now, the band released a live album live in France, which came out in 2024. The band's current album that's going to be out very soon is called Wings of Time. I'm really looking forward to hearing this. Like I said, if you've not heard the albums, I highly recommend them. So we're going to come to the live performance now. Leo is an absolute amazing singer. Coming from Sweden, he's got a very, very powerful voice, as you can imagine. And to be honest, he doesn't really sound very Swedish. Although he's from Sweden, he sounds more Americanized. This young kid can certainly hit the high notes with melodic emotions and harmonies. And as I could say for Parker, he's an absolutely great guitarist, very young, talented, got a lot of enthusiasm, charisma, energy, and plays from the soul. The additional members, like I said, Stefan is a great guitarist, Mike is a great drummer, bassist, Matthew is a great bass player. Now, some of you may know him. He plays for the band Kate's Acid. Now, with the band having lots of energy on stage, the crowd are really behind them. They pulled off an absolute amazing performance. From start to finish, I was in my element. I thought these guys were one of the best bands of the whole festival. Not to say there were some other great bands on there, but for me, Wings of Steel were one of the better bands, which I was really looking forward to. The twin harmonies by Stefan and also Parker were absolutely great, trading off for one another, a little bit like Leatherwolf would do. So the lineup songs for the set list would be Fall in Line, Liar in Love, Cry of the Damned, She Cries, Storm Child, Wings of Time, Rhythm of Desire, We Rise, and the last song would be Wings of Steel. Like I said, Wings of Steel are absolutely amazing musicians. I highly recommend their music, and I wish them all the best. After an amazing performance by Wings of Steel, next up would be German power metal act Paragon. Now, Paragon, I've played this festival before, if you've seen them before, and they've been around for many years. They're a great band, originally formed back in 1990 in Hamburg, Germany. This five-piece band started out with their first demo in 1993. It was called Storm of Decline. This was followed by an EP in 1994. This was called Into the Black. In 1995, the band would release their debut album. This was called World of Sin, released on a label called Blue Mel, and would feature long-time original guitarist Martin Christian, who's been with the band for many, many years. He did have a little break from the band, but now he's returned and he's doing an absolutely great performance. And with the success of the band's debut album, wasn't long before the band would release their next album back in 1998. This was called The Final Command. The album was released on BO Records. Now, this band have done some great albums. I've done quite a few albums, to be honest. If you're a fan of such bands as Judas Priest, Saxon, Gravedigger, Primal Fear. Other bands that spring to mind when listening to Paragon's music would be Hellstar, Accept. Now, the band's last album was released in 2024 for Massacre Records. This was called Metalation. It's a fantastic album, and if you've not heard it, folks, please check it out. So the band's current lineup would be Martin Christian on guitars, long-time member. Would have Jan Bunnin, who's been on the band since this Final Command album. He plays bass guitar. Would have Andreas Biskin on vocals. Would have Jan Bertram on guitars. And on drums, we'd have a very young, talented drummer called Jason Warped, who's a great drummer. He's also the son of guitarist Martin Christian. Now, these guys have played some absolutely great festivals throughout the band's career. Wacken, Summer Breeze, Pt.3, to name a few. Like I said, they have played the Headbangers Open Air Festival before, but they are a really, really great band live to watch. And for me, it was great to see Martin back in the band. From start to finish, the band played old school power metal, like I say, mixing the mixture of US power metal, German power metal, and also the traditional bands such as Judas Priest and Saxon. This was definitely a Headbangers Delight performance. The band performed very well, tight, professional, and all around great entertainers. So now I'm going to tell you what the songs were that Paragon played live at Headbangers Open Air. So the set would open up with The Legacy, followed by Chalice of Steel, Legions of Metal, Law of the Blade, Palace of Sin, Across the Wastelands, Feel the Knife, Green Hell, Into the Black, Impaler, Enemies of the Tyrant, and the last song would be called Thunderstorm. Great band, Paragon. They've been at it for many, many years, and if you've not seen them live before, please do. Great band. The next band to hit the stage would be a band called The Night Eternal from Germany. Originally formed back in 2018 in Essen, Germany, this band have released 2 albums and an EP. The band's current label is Metal Blade Records. The band released their first EP, which was self-titled. It was in 2019. This would be followed by a single called Shadows Servants, released in 2020. And the band's debut album was called Moonlit Cross, released in 2021. This album was released on a label called Van Records. Now, this 5-piece band consists of Jones Nunhill on bass guitar. We'd have vocalist Ricardo Buem. We'd also have Rob Richeter on guitars. We'd also have on guitars Henry Kasselberg and drummer Elicita Praculet. So that would be the lineup for the band The Night Eternal. Now, having on stage thrash metal bands, power metal, it was time for this band to play something slightly different, just to calm the audience down. This time around would have sort of like a classic doom metal vibe, along with the new wave of British heavy metal bands. This band kind of reminded me of Angel Witch, along with very early Hell, a band from the UK. I don't know why, but for some reason the vocals kind of remind me a little bit of some kind of gothic band. Having said that, they do fit really well with the band's music. So The Night Eternal was something different. It was very interesting to watch. They were good performers. Like I say, Ricardo, the singer, was a complete nutter on stage. Headbanging galore. Great performer. Really got the crowd going. The band in general were playing some really good music. Very tight, very professional. I got to say that the rest of the band performed very, very well. Some great guitar playing here and some rhythm sections. So now I'm going to tell you what the songs were that Night Eternal played live. The band would open up with Between the Worlds, In Tartarus, Princess of Darkness, Run with the Wolves, Shadows Servant, Deadly as a Synth, The Vision, Elysian, Stars Guide My Way, and the last song would be called Moonlit Cross. So that was the songs played by Night Eternal. If you want to check out something different, old school like dual metal with new wave of British heavy metal elements, this is a band to check out. Great performance, great band all around. Next to hit the stage was another German band. This was a thrash metal band that most of you may know. They played the festival before. A band called Rezet. Formed back in 2004 as a four-piece, the lineup would consist of vocalist and guitarist Ricky Wagner, drummer Bastian Santon, bassist Lorenz Kandorf, and on guitars, Nikolai Antanasov. So that would be the lineup for Rezet. In the same year the band formed in 2004, the band released their first demo. This was called Raped Law. It did pretty good on the scene, and it was followed by the next demo in 2006. This is called Cage of Destruction. Followed by two more demos. One in 2006 was called Metal Night, and also followed by Pt.3. In 2008, the band released their first EP. It was called Toxic Avenger, followed by another demo which was called Have Gun, Will Travel. And this would be the same title for the band's debut album, which was released in 2010, was released on Iron Codex Records. With the success of the band's debut album, it received some really good reviews internationally and nationally. It was next album was to come in 2012, and this was called Civic Nightmares, released on Metalizer Records. Now, these guys had some success supporting Anvil on the European and UK tour some years ago, and the band would release their next album in 2016. This was called Reality is a Lie. 2019, the band released their next album. It was called Deal With It, followed by the next successful album in 2021. This was called Truth in Between. And in 2024, the band released their current album, which was self-titled Reps. Having listened to the band's music, they're very much influenced by US thrash metal from the Bay Area, particularly, especially Exodus. I'd have to say that Ricky's vocals are very much like Dave Mustaine, and they really do fit well with the Exodus style music. Other than Megadeth, Exodus, another band that springs to mind when I listen to Retz's music would be Death Angel. Now, Retz played Headbangers Open Air Festival last year on the warm-up stage. This time they were playing the main stage. The band were ready to hit the stage with an absolute fantastic performance, and the crowd really enjoyed it. These guys play really, really well. They're a really good tight band. As I said, they have supported Anvil on a successful tour around the UK and Europe. These guys play hard and fast. At times, very melodic, but very heavy at times. Like I say, Ricky's vocals very much do come close to Dave Mustaine, which really do fit well with the band's music. I really enjoyed watching these guys live. Playing a 50-minute set, the band did an absolute fantastic performance, showing the true strength and power of the band's music. So I'm going to tell you now what the songs were that Rex played live. And so the band would open up the set list with Children of the Grave, Unholy Grail, Reality is a Lie, Mandatory Eraser, Duck and Cover, Dead End Walking, guitar, and then there was a guitar solo followed by Alone, Prisoner of Fate, Populate Delete, Repeat, Have a Gun, Will Travel, and the last song was the Black Sabbath song Paranoid, dedicated to Ozzy Osbourne. Next up was a band that travelled from the Far East from Japan. We'd have Saber Tiger. Now, these guys were formed back in 1981. Now, these guys are a pretty of a cult classic band alongside Loudness, as we all know. There's also another band, Anthem, but also have Earthshaker. There's some really good bands that have come out of Japan. Also, Vow Wow. So this band would record their first demo back in 1983. They did Saber Tiger 1, 2, and 3 within demos between 1983, 1984, and 1985. In 1986, the band would release their first EP, which was called Arise. With the success of the EP, it wasn't long before the band would record their next EP back in 1987. This was called Crush and Dust. Between 1987 to 1990, the band would release another 4 demos. Now, I don't know why they've done so many demos before they got a record deal. However, the band did release their first successful album back in 1992. This was called Invasion. Now, these guys tend to release albums with Japanese lyrics. And if I had to compare some of their albums, I'd say the early album, especially the first album, Storm in the Sand, and the band's first album, Invasion, kind of reminds me a little bit of Pt.3. There's also vibes of Loudness in the band's music, as well as Anthem. So now I'm going to tell you who's in the lineup for Saber Tiger. Original guitarist Akihito, Kanoshita, also on guitar, who is the original guitarist and also on guitar, Yasuharu Tanaka. The current vocalist is called Takanori Shimamura, with drummer Yusihiro Mizano and bassist Hippokai. So that would be the current lineup for Saber Tiger. With the success of the band's debut album, the band have been recording some successful albums, and in total, the band have released 18 albums, which I say is absolutely fantastic for a band's successful career. The band's latest album is called Eliminated, and it was released in 2024. Like all Japanese musicians, they're very dedicated to what they do live and actually perform in the studio. I have to say, vocalist Takanori is an absolute fantastic singer. It's very, very powerful. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Graham Bonnet, Rob Rock. The musicianship by this band, Saber Tiger, are second to none. If you're a fan of the bands I've already previously mentioned, then this band really need to be heard. Absolutely fantastic band. Live, these guys are absolutely tight and they perform extremely well. Although some of the vocals were sung in Japanese, there's one or two songs sung in English. The crowd appreciated that and they came across very, very well. Absolutely brilliant band live. Both guitarists perform well and the rhythm section perform well as well. All around, this band were great live, very tight, very melodic, very powerful. Kind of music comes across between melodic heavy metal and power metal. All in all, the band performed extremely well. Although, sadly, I don't have a set list for the songs they played live. However, they did come across extremely well with the crowd. After an excellent performance by Saber Tiger, next to hit the stage would be female power thrashers Burning Witches. Now, these girls have been around since 2015. Originally formed in Switzerland, the band is certainly making a name for themselves. Now, the first release was back in 2016, was a single. It was just titled Burning Witches. And this was followed by the band's debut album, which was self-titled, released in 2017. Released on Pledge Music, which featured original members Janine Grub on bass guitar, Lala Frisch Nietzsche on drums, guitarist Romana Cool on guitars, Serena Telly on vocals and on guitars, Ale Weiss. Although the band have gone for some lineup changes, which I'm going to say now was in the current lineup. So the current lineup would be Janie on bass guitar, would have Lala on drums, would also have Romana on guitars. Current vocalist would be called Laura Galdemond on vocals, and also Courtney Cox on guitars. So that's the current lineup. So live, Romana wasn't with the band. They had a standing guitarist who's helping them out at the moment for the live tours under the name of Simone Van Stratton, who's also in a band called Beyond Sanity, who plays guitar for a band called Sisters of Suffocation. In total, the band have released 6 albums, and the band's currently released their new album, which came out last week. It's called Inquisition, and it's released on Napalm Records. They remind me of 2 bands from the late 80s, 2 female bands. Most of you out there may know this bands. One's called Phantom Blue, absolutely great band from America, and the other band from New York was called Mean Streak, who released an album called Roadkill. Laura is an absolute fantastic singer. She can really sing some high notes. She's a great performer. Now, the band played an hour and 5-minute set, so now I'm going to tell you what the songs were that the band played live. So the band would open up the set list with Unleash the Beast, Wings of Steel, Maiden of Steel, 9 Worlds, Dance with the Devil, X and Hammer, Evil Witch, The Spell of the Skull, The Dark Tower, Lucid Nightmare, and the last song would be Burning Witches. Great band live, folks. If you want to check out a really great female band that know how to play their instruments, please check out Burning Witches. Next up with headliners, hard rock, prog rock band Demon. Now, these guys have been around since the early 80s from the UK, classed as new wave of British heavy metal. Now, these guys were formed back in 1979 in Staffordshire, England, by vocalist Dave Hill, who's still in the band today. The band have gone through several lineup changes throughout their career. Now, this band would release their first single called Liar back in 1980, followed by another single in 1981, One Hell of a Night. This would be followed by the band's debut album back in 1981, which was called Night of the Demon. As we all know, the song Night of the Demon is a cult classic. In total, the band have released 13 albums, and the band's current album, which was released back in 2024 for Frontier Records, is called Invincible. If you've not heard it, folks, check it out. Like any band that's been around for many, many years, they do go through lineup changes. And this could be said for Demon. Now, the current lineup for the Demon would be Dave Hill, like I said, the original singer. We'd also have on drums Neil Ogden. On guitars, we'd have Dave Cotterill. And also on guitars, we'd have Dave Paul Hummy. On bass guitar, we'd have Paul Johnson. And on keyboards, we'd have Rick Benton. Was also with the band Magnum. Demon had a lot of success back in the early 80s and did some great support acts and also some headlining shows. Now, it was great to see the band live once more, performing a cult classic set from the band's early material up until the current album. The band performed extremely well, showing their true strength live. The fans were delighted to hear them play the cult classics, as well as some later material. Dave and the boys performed an absolute fantastic set. This was a great headlining act to end the night. So now I'm going to tell you what the songs were played by Demon. So the band would open up with Night of the Demon, the cult classic song, would followed by Hurricane, Sign of a Madman, The Plague, Nowhere to Run, Face the Master, Remembrance Day, Wonderland, Life on the Wire, The Spell, Don't Break the Circle, and the last track would be called One Hell of a Night. So that was the actual set for Demon. So please check these guys out live. They're great live. And like I said, they're out the new wave of British heavy metal cult classic band.